Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Art of Business English podcast. Andrew Ambrosius yet again for another episode. Now, if you're not aware or if you're just joining me, last week I ran a pretty epic week of webinars throughout Easter. So today I'll be sharing one of those with you, which was entitled How to Effectively Prepare for a Meeting. Now, the content from this was actually based on my course, which I launched earlier this year, which is called Confidence in Business Meetings or Business English Meetings. And on this course, you learn all of the steps of how to plan out your meetings, how to participate in meetings, and how to run really productive and effective meetings. So this webinar is about 45 minutes long. So I hope you enjoy it. A bit of long listening here for you today, but it was really insightful. People loved it, got some really great feedback. So I hope you enjoy the content. Please feel free to drop me your feedback or comments over at the Art of Business English website. And yeah, be sure if you want to connect with me, then you can join me on Facebook at the AOBE, or you can follow me on Instagram at the Art of Business English. Okay, people, that's it for me. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you all next week. I hope you enjoy it. So today we're going to be looking at how to effectively preparing for your meetings, which really people no one's really taught how to do meetings. There's no school for meetings, but meetings are playing an incredibly important role in business. In fact, we spend on average, we spend about 40% of time in meetings, and some people can spend up to even like about 80% of the time, depending on their role in the company. So, they can be really, really big drain on company resources, and they can be a source of great, unproductiveness, which is a problem, especially in organizations if people don't really understand how to effectively prepare or plan for meetings. They can actually end up wasting a lot of time. One of the big things that people often do is actually call meetings when they're not necessary, which can be incredibly frustrating, especially now with people working remotely due to the confinement as a result of the coronavirus. Lots of managers feel like they're losing control or they're losing touch with their employees because they're not there physically with them. So as a knee-jerk reaction to this, they just call meetings every 5 minutes. And as I'm sure, especially if you have kids at home, it's very difficult sometimes to balance your work life and your personal life if you're working remotely or working from home. So really important to not call meetings unless they're absolutely necessary, and really important to ensure that you only call the people into the meeting who have a role to play. So let's look at what we're going to cover on this webinar today. So we're going to look at the keys to a successful meeting. We're going to look at how we can establish the aims, and if your meeting doesn't have an aim or a very clear objective, then it's destined to fail, or at least be unproductive and a waste of people's time. And I'm going to go over our little pre-meeting checklist, which I've got. It's very extensive. Now, just want to point out that this webinar goes into a lot of detail about all the things you should do. And again, it's depending on the type of meeting you're running, who's attending, how important and senior the people are, if they're important customers or clients, or et cetera, et cetera. So it really depends on the style of meeting. And again, that's really one of the most important things: understanding who's going to be there, understanding your audience, understanding what they know, what they need to know, etc., etc. So let's dive in and look at part one, which is the keys to a successful meeting. First one is POSPEC, which is an acronym, okay? So we're going to be looking at POSPEC first. Then we're going to be looking at the pre-meeting. So this is quite extensive, like a pre-meeting, during the meeting, and then post-meeting. And as I said, this is really if you want to do a super well-organized meeting. So POSPEC, what does POSPEC mean? Well, basically it's an acronym. So factors for a successful meeting. You need to be prepared. You need to have your objectives very clear. There needs to be a structure. The meeting should be timed. So, if the meeting doesn't have a time limit, it's destined to be a problem for some people, because you might end up wasting their time or they might be in a meeting that's too long. And it should be very participatory. If people are what we call bystanders, if they're just sitting there watching and they're not actually participating, then they shouldn't actually be in the meeting. And it needs to be effectively chaired. So again, leadership is important, or at least having someone who is in a position to control or direct that meeting effectively, because if not, then the meeting will lose many of the things it needs to have, like its structure. It will lose track of the timing, and it won't be very participatory, okay? And you won't actually achieve your objectives, okay? So an effective meeting is well prepared. It has clear objectives, okay? Or has a clear objective, because, you can have one main clear objective and then two or three, supporting ideas. It has a clear structure to it, so it needs to be well structured. We're going to use an agenda to help us have a clear structure. And is an effective use of time. As I mentioned before, people fail to acknowledge that. I mean, if you've got people in the organization, imagine you've got directors of departments or even the CEO of the company. Imagine you've got 10 people in a meeting and that meeting lasts for 3 hours. All you need to do is multiply the salaries of those people for 3 hours by 3 hours, and you get an idea of how expensive that meeting is going to be. So, imagine a director of a meeting's hourly rate is, 50 or 100 euros, and then you multiply those people by 10. Like every hour that meeting goes on is going to cost the company a considerable amount of time. And people really don't think about meetings that way. They just think, I've got an important topic I need to talk about, and then they get people into meetings. And that it's actually it's a double-edged sword, which means it has two negative effects, because it's making people be in a meeting and you're using their time and it's costing money, but you're also preventing them from actually achieving something productive in that time. So you're losing twice. So that's something that you need to think about before you start calling meetings, and try and make your management team aware of. It needs to be participatory. If people are not participating, then they shouldn't be there. And again, it needs to be effectively chaired so that we keep all of these things running smoothly. Let's look at the pre-meeting setup then. So again, planning is the key, and often people don't really plan meetings. They something important to them comes up and they fire off a meeting invitation. In the planning stage, it's really important that planning is key. A lot of people don't actually plan meetings. They just have a loose agenda or an idea of something, and then they get people to come along. Very informal meetings. I'm not sure if that happens in your organization, but many organizations are running lots of informal meetings. So you need to have some of these things to consider. Appropriate room lighting. Little things like that, no? Does the room have effective lighting? And will you be providing refreshments for face-to-face meetings? And, you need to test any equipment. So if you have an important meeting with some suppliers or potential clients, you need to think about these things. If you're in a well-lit room and you've tested your presentation equipment, and you've also thought about taking a break and having some refreshments, so drinks and coffee and things like that. Okay, small meeting size, only relevant attendees, so no spectators, as I mentioned before. It needs to be participatory, so you need to have only the relevant people attending that meeting. Clearly defined roles, so these should be on the agenda, so the chairperson, the minute taker, and the attendees. And if the attendees are attending, they should know what they need to bring with them and things like that. So if they have to bring a report or update you on something. And also understanding who will be attending, what they know already, and what they need to know. I mean, it's really important to understand your audience. You don't want to waste people's time giving them irrelevant information or information that's not going to benefit them. So that's really something that you need to think about in advance, okay? And polling for meeting day time for larger meetings. If possible, send out a little mini, like a poll. So like, is this time good for you? I think there's like a little app you can use, or a website, a web page. And in this situation, what you're doing is you're trying to make it appropriate time for everyone, as opposed to just you setting the time and then sending an invitation and saying to people, please attend my meeting at this time. And planning start and finish times, and will there be breaks? So just think about how it's going to run before you go into the meeting. How will this meeting flow? When will it start? When will it finish? People need to know that there will be a finish time, when it's going to finish, and you need to be loyal and faithful to that finish time. Otherwise, people could get quite frustrated, as they might have meetings coming up after your meeting, okay? And for long meetings, more than about an hour, you should take a break, okay? All right, so let's look at the next one, planning for success. We also need to have a written agenda. Now, this is also important to note. Send it out 24 hours prior to the meeting. A lot of people don't actually send out their agendas, or they send them out to people the same morning of the meeting. It's very difficult for someone to prepare effectively, so an attendee to prepare effectively, if the meeting agenda is not sent to them in advance. If people have questions about the agenda or about their role in the meeting, then this gives them time to prepare things. And as you know, an agenda is incredibly important for helping people see the structure, the flow, and the timing, the topics. All those things are on the agenda. You need to be clear and transparent about your goals and expectations. The simpler and the less goals there are, the better, because if there are lots of objectives for a meeting, then you should probably divide it up and break it into smaller meetings, because otherwise the meeting is going to lose its focus. And if we're very clear about goals and expectations, then people can prepare effectively for it. You need to also prepare necessary documents and data. There's nothing worse than getting to a meeting and not having the information, or the necessary information that you want to talk about or discuss. So again, this is all about planning and preparing effectively. You will waste time if you don't have the relevant data, and you will frustrate people, especially senior managers who are very short on time, if you don't bring what is required or the necessary documentation. And again, with the agenda, maybe someone is required to bring a report or some information on a project or something. And if you don't allow them to bring the necessary information, you're actually going to make them look a bit silly in front of their colleagues, and they won't really appreciate that. So about being a professional means sending the agenda out early and being well organized. You should also allow time for small talk and plan introductions. Again, it will depend on the type of meeting, but if you're having people external people coming into the organization, then you're going to have to make them feel welcome, have some small talk, which is very customary before a meeting. That should be planned into how long the meeting is going to take. And you need to introduce people appropriately and showing respect towards their seniority or their role within the organization, or if they're an external customer, really being polite, introducing them to your team, and making sure that they understand why the people are in the meeting. So if you have an external client coming in, saying, this is Mary from finance, she will answer any of your questions related to this proposal that we've sent you. So like putting a name and a face to people and a role to people really helps everyone understand why people are at the meeting and what their purpose is, okay? So the next part is, during a meeting. So now that we've prepared effectively, some keys to a successful meeting during a meeting is a productive use of time. So participating, structure, and outcomes are key to a productive meeting. So let's look at some of those. So actively participate and encourage others. Now, this is very relevant, especially if you're the chairperson, but even if you're a participant, you really need to actively participate. There's nothing worse than someone who is looking at their phone or things like that in a meeting and doesn't seem like they want to be there, or they're not interested in being there. It's very important that you take notes, follow the meeting, participate actively, and encourage your colleagues to clarify things, or encourage your colleagues to invite questions from them, or to invite questions from you, and things like that, just so that the meeting's much more lively. As the chairperson, you should let all opinions be heard. Some people are naturally shy, so they're a bit timid, and their personality is not an extrovert type person. And a lot of meetings that we're having, if we are in Europe, will be with international colleagues. So we'll probably be meeting in English, and for a lot of us, English is not our first language. So maybe we feel a little bit nervous about our level. So really need to make people feel comfortable, and try and allow everyone's opinion to be heard. If someone's quite aggressive, or they're talking over people, or they're not allowing other people to speak, then you as the chairperson need to say, oh, hold on a minute, can we just let Mary finish what she was saying before you continue? And those are the little things that you need to do to help opinions be heard. Also, this is really important, and big one that people often do in meetings. You need to focus on solutions and not problems and excuses, because meetings can often go into a negative spiral. And this is when, instead of taking responsibility for actions, people just blame others. And we should, especially as a chairperson, we should try and avoid this, because people can get quite defensive, and then the meeting does lose its focus. It's not a productive meeting, because it turns into a blame game where people are blaming each other. So really, outcome-focused meetings are meetings that fix things, they make decisions, resolving issues, and you focus on solutions to problems and not on the problems themselves. So that's something as well to consider. You need to build consensus. So build consensus, it helps to obviously create a positive group mood. So you really need to work towards getting everyone on the same page, and towards agreement. And to do this, you need to air all of people's concerns. So to air concerns means, everyone is allowed, everyone feels comfortable to express any concerns or problems they might have with proposals or with decisions that are to be made. And this working through these concerns will hopefully reach or lead us to a consensus among the people at the meeting. But if we don't allow everyone to have their opinion heard, then some people will be feeling resentful, and they won't be in a consensus mood, and this will not create a positive group mentality. Okay, so that's another thing to consider. You need to be inclusive in decision making, which means you need to share all the information. This is important. Some people within organizations use information as power, and they try to control the decisions that are made. If you don't provide all attendees at the meeting with the same information, or the most relevant or necessary information to make decisions, then it's very difficult for people to make informed decisions on an issue. So you can't really be hiding things or have a hidden agenda, as this will not lead to a productive or successful meeting. So you need to make sure you share all the information with people, so that people are ready when they come to the meeting and there's no surprises or secrets. Okay, so inclusive decision making is based around that. And keep on time. This can be a real big problem sometimes, especially with some cultures, Mediterraneans, from my experience, bit of an issue with timing. People arrive late, meetings go over time, and that is a real sign. Even though people don't really see that it's an issue, it actually is. It's a lack of respect, and it's not very professional, and it's very frustrating. And if you are working with international colleagues or with other people, especially your clients, respecting people's time is probably one of the most important things that you can do. So it's really important that you keep on time, and even if you don't achieve all of your objectives or outcomes, you have to wrap that meeting up and say, look, we haven't been able to get through everything today, so I propose that we reschedule another meeting just to finalize the last point, or something like that, or even asking people, would everyone mind if we continued for another 20 minutes to just finish this last point. At least you're, showing that you respect people's time. And some people may say, yeah, I'm fine with staying for an extra 20 minutes. Or someone might say, I'm really sorry, but I've got another meeting or I've got somewhere to be after this. So it's just about showing that respect towards people's time, and they're really going to appreciate that. There's nothing worse than being stuck in a meeting that's just going on, and you're just getting more and more frustrated. So you need to be sensitive and aware and respect people's time at all times, okay? Stick to the agenda and document. This is also a common problem, and this can lead to very unsuccessful meetings. People like to hijack, sequestrar your meeting agenda. They have got their own hidden agenda, or they've got their own things that they want to talk about. And of course, as you know with most people, everything's important to everyone. My issues are important to me. So it's really important that you have the strength of character to keep people on your agenda, and that there's a culture within your organization that we only work on the issues of the agenda. If there are AOB, which is any other business, that can be raised at the end, and then maybe you need to set a separate meeting for that to take place. So sticking to the agenda is really important, and being really sensitive to people who are bringing up things that are not relevant, then what you can do in that case is just like tell them that they have to keep coming back to the agenda. Okay, so let's finish up this one here. Finish with concrete plans and task completion. That's the key to a successful meeting. You can't get to the end of a meeting and be like, now what? What's the purpose of like if you leave a meeting and you're not sure what the next step is or what you were supposed to do, then that meeting was classified as a failure, really, because meetings should be objective outcome orientated. So at the end of the meeting, you should achieve something, or there should be a very clear next step. So people need to leave a meeting feeling empowered, and they need to leave a meeting having a very clear idea in their mind about, what they need to do as a task for the next meeting, or what they should do as a next step. And as a chairperson or as a leader of a meeting, you need to really clarify with people before they leave what they understood as well. Because sometimes people think they understood what the next step is, but they just say, yeah, and they didn't actually understand it. So really clear on what the next step is, what the tasks are, what the concrete plans are, and what your objectives are moving forward. Okay, so that's super important. Now, etiquette and rules is also important. So follow some general rules on behavior. I'm not sure if you've experienced some of these, but you should always follow the chairperson out of respect, and they are the ones that are going to be driving or guiding the meeting along. So you need to, if they speak, you need to listen. Don't be late. That's a terrible thing to do, because you're wasting people's time, and there's nothing worse than coming into a meeting late. You're interrupting it if it's already started. It doesn't make you look good, and it really does upset the flow of that meeting. Don't speak over others or interrupt. Sometimes you need to interrupt because you're having a very difficult discussion, but don't speak over others. Let them finish what they're going to say, and then ask politely if it's your turn. Turn taking is an art, but it's very important that we respect other people and give them a chance to finish what they want to say. Okay. No side conversations. That can be very frustrating when you're in a meeting and you're trying to present an idea, and then there's two other people who are having a little discussion amongst themselves. So don't do side conversations. It doesn't look good, and it's also very frustrating, especially to the person who's trying to deliver their idea at the time. If you're giving a presentation and there are two people at the back of the room, or one part of the table who are just pretty much ignoring your presentation, that can be incredibly frustrating, and it's a very big lack of respect to the speaker. Give your opinion, but allow others theirs. So that's obvious, no? Like, it's very important that you give your opinion, but everyone's opinion is valid, and understanding opinions and airing everyone's concerns leads to better outcomes and more effective meetings. Be constructive and stick to the facts. This is very difficult. A lot of people have trouble controlling their emotions. We are creatures, we are animals at the end of the day, but should try and remove emotion from business and think with a clear, very strategical mind. I often struggle with this because I'm an emotional guy as well, but we should try and stick to the facts, and we should try and be constructive and not critical, and start raising our voice and getting frustrated and angry at people, because these emotions really don't lead to constructive or positive outcomes in meetings. Okay, be prepared. That's one of probably the biggest, most important thing. Preparation, the detail really is there. If you prepare well a meeting, then it stands a much higher chance of being a success. Okay, it's like anything in life, really. The more you plan, the better it's going to be. The more successful that will be, and then the decisions that you take will be based on the plan and not reactionary, based on emotion or a response to something that happened. What else? No hidden agendas. It's very annoying when people have a hidden agenda. They say one thing, but they mean another thing, and it's really difficult to get to a solution or an outcome, a desired outcome, because people are not being truthful or telling you what they really feel. And adhere to meeting confidentiality. That's incredibly important. How many times have you gone into a meeting, you've spoken about important issues, and then suddenly people start asking you in the cafeteria about some decisions that were made in a meeting which should have been confidential. That doesn't create a good environment within the organization. That doesn't create trust amongst colleagues, and that's going to make it difficult for people to really feel comfortable talking about issues of sensitive issues in the future. So confidentiality is paramount in meetings, especially when you're talking about sensitive things, especially things that are related to staff hiring or firing or redundancies and things like that. Okay, and respect others' opinions and points of view at all times. I mean, I think one of the first rules in my school and my family is respect. I think if you respect those around you and everyone that you are dealing with, then you're only going to have a good outcome. It's when people don't respect others that things really fall apart. Okay, so that's during the meeting. Let's look at the final part here, which is your post-meeting. So the follow-up. People often forget about follow-up, except follow-up is probably really one of the most effective ways to build relationships and really show people your professionalism and how really effective you are as a leader or as a business professional. So in meetings, following up with people, it helps you to evaluate. It's a gauge of satisfaction. It helps people understand next steps, and following up with them can be as simple as just saying to a customer, I really appreciate you having spent the afternoon in our organization, and we really look forward to working with you, or if there's anything you need, all that type of stuff. Little things like that, a quick call or an email make a huge difference. But often people are busy, then they move on to the next thing, and they forget to do the follow-up. And if you don't follow up with people, things get forgotten. So consensus on decision and task assignment. So really make sure that you follow up, make sure that people are clear. The great way to follow up with people is have someone actually write up the minutes from the meeting, and then those minutes are emailed out to the attendees, and all of the decisions that were taken and the things that were agreed are written into the minutes. And as well, if anyone was assigned a task or something for the next meeting, or some future report or project or something that needed to be assigned to someone, it's very clear, it's written down in the minutes, and people can see that, yep, I'm responsible for that and I need to have it ready by this time. That's just clarity. This is post-meeting follow-up. Also ensure expectations are clear for task completion. Often people they say yes, everything's good, and then at the end, a week later, you're like, so where's the thing I asked you for in the meeting? They're like, oh, I didn't realize you needed that now. So you really need to be clear on what your expectations are. Giving employees or team members clear expectations about what it is that you expect of them is one of the keys to great leadership. People don't need you to fluff about and tell them what they want to hear. People just need you to be very clear with them and set clear boundaries and clear expectations, and then you can lead them to go and off and work. You don't need to annoy them with meetings and checking on them. As long as people understand what it is that they need to do, when they need to finish it by, and what your expectations are for that work, then you can leave them to work and they can do it independently. Okay, evaluate your effectiveness. This can be really important, especially if you're meeting with, really important meetings when you're negotiating contracts with potential customers or suppliers and things like that. If you can have a post-meeting meeting where you can evaluate how successful that negotiation was, what things you did well, what things you could have done better. In a really effective organization, people would go through that process. Did you achieve the goals? Were the outcomes clear? And did you get through everything? You can even just do that yourself. If you're having a small team meeting, you could just quickly check your list and say, did I achieve these 3 things that I wanted to achieve in the meeting? Doing that will just help close the loop of the whole from preparation, delivery, and evaluation. Okay, so I encourage that. And again, as I mentioned before, follow up with any guests or customers or suppliers. Give them a call or an email, and always thank them for their time. That rarely happens, and it makes a huge difference to the way people perceive you and your organization. So I really encourage that. People often overlook that. And something easy that you can do, just a quick thank you. And often people will be like, yeah, I really appreciate that. Actually, I did have a question. And then they'll ask you to clarify something. And that one thing that you clarify with them could be the one thing that makes them decide to sign with you or take the next step with your organization. So don't miss that opportunity to show your professionalism and build those relationships with people. Okay, so that is the end of the first part, which is the keys to a successful meeting. A lot of information, I know. But now in the second part, we're going to be looking at about setting our objectives and making sure we have our aims clear. So in part 2 of this webinar, we're going to look at what we want, what do we want to achieve. We need to ask ourselves those questions. Identifying your key message, that's super important, and people often overlook that. If you want people to do something or sign with you or buy something or adopt one of your policies or something, you need to have your messaging extremely clear. Otherwise, it'll get lost in the noise. And you should keep it to 4. And what does good, okay, and bad look like? So I'm going to explain in detail what I mean by these 4 points. So let's look at goal setting. Before you actually go into your meeting, you need to have your goals clear. So clear goals are key to a successful meeting. I've mentioned this before. You should, what are we trying to achieve? Are we giving information? What information needs transmitting? Am I training someone? Am I trying to get them to use a new computer program? Am I giving them information on company policy or a new company policy? So what is it that you are trying to transmit? Very clear. The one thing they need to leave this meeting with is this. And then we work our way back from there. That's what people often forget. They're like, I'm important. This policy is very important. So I'm going to tell the world how important it is and why they should all adopt it. But you're not thinking about it from the perspective of the listener or the person who's in that meeting. You need to think what is it that I want them to understand and come away thinking at the end of that meeting, and how can I achieve that? So you work your way back and you start from the perspective of the people in the meeting and not from your perspective. Unfortunately, most people, and it's not human nature, we start from what we want to do, what we want to achieve, and not what we want other people to think or go away leaving the meeting. Okay, so trying to change the focus from us to them is a great place to start. Okay, if you're doing training, for example, what should people have learned at the end? That's an easy thing to do. So again, start from the end and work back. Okay, so I want people to learn this. So they need to know this by the end of the course. So how can we make them know this? planning, what plans should be made by the end. So if you're doing a planning meeting, so these are different types of meetings, no? Like giving information meeting or a planning meeting or a training meeting. Again, you're working your way back. Problem solving. So what problem should be solved by the end? So again, we start with the end in mind and we always work our way back. And if you're a great trainer, you do that. That's how you get people to learn things. You think with the end in mind, and you work the way back to how you can achieve that. Okay, and if it's a process improvement, how should the process look? Okay, so that's the end in mind again. So that's how we do goal setting. Basically, let's look at key messages. Once we have our one main thing, so our one goal for that meeting established in our mind, and we know what it is that we want people to leave the meeting with, we then need to have the key messages, and these key messages need to be aligned with our desired outcomes. So people will only understand what they need to do through this messaging. So your messaging is really important. It needs to be super clear. So think about what might influence people. You know, what information might influence them to adopt this idea or start using this new program. What information do they need to understand? So again, we're thinking about it from the perspective of the audience and not from our perspective. You understand what they need because you've designed the program, or you've designed the process. You know exactly how the process works, but these people don't, and so they need to understand it. So you need to help them think from their perspective, not from yours. Okay, another one is clarity and clear. Everything, your key messages need to be very clear. You should be able to write them out in one sentence using very clear language. No fancy language. I know that many people say, oh, but if I use these fancy vocabulary, it'll make me look like I speak good English. The clearer the better. So you don't need to be, using the world's most proficient English vocabulary. You just need to be writing things out very clearly in one sentence, and make sure that if people can understand that idea or that message in one sentence or one paragraph at the most. Okay, and keep your messages to a maximum of 4. So again, you have one objective for the meeting, but you have these 4 key messages. People will only remember 3, maybe 4 at the most. They won't remember everything. So if you've got this big list of things, they need to know this, and this, you need to think of ways to really get it down to 4, because people will switch off. They will only have the about 45 minutes attention span, and if you want them to come away with a very clear idea, they need to be only 3 or 4 key messages to support that objective. Okay, and finally, we need to have some perspective of what is a good outcome for us, what's an okay outcome for us, and what's a bad outcome. If we plan outcomes, then we can evaluate how successful the meeting is. So think about what a good outcome will look like. If everyone does this, if we get 100% adoption of this, then that's a good outcome for me, and that's your objective. And then you need to imagine an okay outcome. And then you need to ask yourself, are you willing to accept that? Will you try again another day? So these are some little questions you should ask yourself. Because if the outcome is not desirable, or it's okay, maybe you need to try again. Okay? And you need to think about what a bad outcome will look like, and how will you deal with it, and what things might lead to a bad outcome. If you understand the things that might lead to a bad outcome, then you can mitigate them before they happen. So, thinking about some of the resistance people might have to this policy, or thinking about some of the questions that people might come and ask you, or thinking about some of the reasons why people won't want to adopt that. If you think about all the bad things or all the reasons why people won't do it, then you'll have answers, or you'll have excuses or reasons or arguments to give them, and that makes your messaging and your outcomes much, or the probability that you'll achieve your outcome much more effective. So don't just think it's going to be all rosy and perfect and everyone's going to love my meeting and adopt my proposal. You need to think about why they might not want to, and then you'll be much more prepared. Okay, so those are some of the things that you need to consider when you're thinking about setting your meeting outcomes, messaging, and some of the ways that you can mitigate problems or resistance in a meeting. Okay, so again, this is pretty deep. It's pretty high level. It's for meetings where you're going to be really important meetings when you're dealing with some really important customers. But even within the organizations, maybe you've got a new policy, or your boss has said to you, now employees need to start working every day at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to finish earlier. But how are we going to make people adopt this? Maybe people don't want to start at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're happy to start at 9. So you need to think about all of the resistance that, or all the arguments people might have. So just going through this process for some of your meetings will make a big difference. Okay, and let's look then at the last part of this webinar, which is basically like our meeting preparation checklist. So once we've done our planning, we've got we've done our pre-planning, we understand our objectives, we understand all of the things, messaging and all the things that we want people to come away from the meeting. We need to make sure that we have covered all of the things so that our meeting is ready to go. So I've got a checklist here, and you can see that first we're looking at objectives, purpose, outcomes, and messages. We're going to look at attendees and roles, items and timings, necessary information and documents, meeting style and mechanics, logistics, time, place, equipment, etc., sent agenda and or a reading list, and the final preparation. So these are all the steps that you need to follow. So this is a complete system for preparing a meeting. So objectives, do you have your objectives, outcomes, and key messages clear? Super important. It's the first thing you need to check off. Have you got your objectives clear? Is the purpose of the meeting on the agenda, and this is very important, clear to all participants? Because as the person who's holding the meeting or running the meeting, the purpose of the meeting may be very clear to you, but other people may not really understand that. So is it going to be an information sharing meeting? Will you seek input for a discussion from the participants? Will there be decisions be made in this meeting? So all of these things need to be clear and actually on the agenda. The purpose needs to be on the agenda. Okay. Have you thought about the outcomes, the good, the okay, or the bad at the end of the meeting, and given those some thought, and maybe thought of some things to combat negative or resistance or pushback from people? And have you written out your key messages in a short sentence just to make it very clear? Okay, so those are some things to do for objectives. Now, with the attendees and roles, have you invited the correct people, and are the roles clear? Okay, so really important. How many times have you received an email with a meeting request, and you're like, why do I even have to be at this meeting? Inexperienced people or people who don't understand how to run meetings effectively, just invite anyone that they think needs to be there. Okay. Have you only invited necessary people, no spectators? The less people, the better, which is surprising because many people think, no, there needs to be lots of people, because if there's lots of people, my meeting will be more important. Okay, again, remove your ego and just be more effective as a leader, or more effective as a team member. Have you assigned roles to each attendee? Make sure someone is taking the minutes and someone is chairing. Really important. You need to have a minute taker and you need to have a chair. Those are two key roles. And then the attendees need to understand what their role is in the meeting. Are they presenting? Are they giving an update on something? Do they need to make a decision? Are they required to give some information on a project or on a topic within the organization? Make sure it's clear. Write it on the agenda. Is everyone clear on what role they are playing in the meeting, as I just mentioned? And do you know the role people will be playing? If they are from an external company, that's really important as well. If you're organizing meetings with people who are coming from other organizations, why are they coming? I mean, why has the external organization decided to bring 5 people from the organization? Think about it. You can't just have people come up to a meeting and you don't know why they're there. It's going to create a real confusing and not a really great start to the meeting. So you need to get in contact with the person who's organizing the meeting and say, okay, who's this person? Why are they coming? Oh, okay, they're the purchasing manager and they are responsible for this. Okay, great. And then you put a role to their face, you put a name to the face, and then you know why they're there. and what purpose they are actually playing in the meeting. So all of these things need to be considered to have an effective meeting. Have you researched your attendees' expectations, goals, and knowledge of the meeting topic? If people are coming from another company and they're really interested in purchasing this product, then make sure that you've got all the information. Make sure that you try and understand what they already know about the company or the product they're interested in, so that you don't give them information that they already have and then waste time. So the more information you can get from the meeting organizer from the other company, the better. This is going to lead to a much more effective meeting and be much better use of people's time. Okay, and it'll make you look more professional too. All right, items and timing. So list the items and tasks and assign appropriate timing. People never do this, but you should. Have you listed the items in a logical order to allow people to leave early? Don't you hate that? Someone starts talking at the middle point of a meeting with someone who's from another department. That's important that they have a discussion, of course, but it's not relevant to the other three people in the meeting. If you want to talk about agenda items that are only relevant to one or two people, put them at the end so that the other people in the meeting can leave, and then they'll be grateful because they won't be sitting around in a meeting for another 10 or 15 minutes with you talking to two other people or one other person about something that's not relevant to the whole meeting. So that's a great little tip. Think about it. Think about how it's relevant, these topics, and if it's really necessary for everyone to be there during the whole meeting. And have a culture in the organization where you actually promote people to leave and get back to work if it's not relevant for them to be there. Have you thought about how long each item will take to complete? Really important. Put it on the agenda. Item 1, outline the problem. How long will this take? Brainstorm solutions. How long will this take? Think about it. 10, 15 minutes? Put it on the agenda, and then people have a very clear idea. And you, as the leader of the meeting, will be able to keep a flow. You'll be able to keep track of the time a lot easier than just having a piece of paper with several ideas on it and no visual guide on timing. Have you written the time on the agenda next to each item? Okay, that's what I just mentioned. Are you trying to achieve too many things in the given time? That is one of my problems. I'm an overachiever. I try and achieve a lot. So be realistic about what you can achieve in an hour, and if there's too many things, then you have to schedule another meeting or make the meeting an hour and a half. Okay, really be realistic, and by thinking about how long each item will take will give you much more perspective on how long the actual overall meeting will take. Okay, so that's really something to consider. Again, all of this comes back to planning. Have you written your items as questions to stimulate thought? If you're sending out your agenda 24 hours and someone reads an agenda item and it's a question, like, how can we solve this problem? They will instantly start thinking about it as, how can I answer this question? Not like, this is the problem. No, how can we solve this problem? What would be some good ideas for solving this problem? Or what improvements could we make to the process? What would be some new policy initiatives? Things like that, using an interrogative pronoun and making people think about it will get them thinking about it before they even arrive at the meeting, and will make your meeting flow faster and be much more productive. Okay. Another one is information and data. Really important. Have you prepared all the relevant data, and have you sent it with the agenda? We really need to make sure that we come to the meeting with all of the essential documents and make sure that people have access to them. Have you sent the necessary documentation, data, figures, etc. to everyone before the meeting? Don't hand it out in the meeting. Give people time to review everything so that your meetings are faster and much more productive. Okay? Have you sent out any required reading to participants? Maybe someone needs to read some important new report from a government agency, or the government's passed some new law. So if people need to understand the ramifications of this law, make sure that you've sent it out to them and you said to them, could you please read pages 89 to 91 of this report before you come to the meeting? So be that specific. Tell people where the information is so that they don't waste their time trying to find it. Okay, so all of these things are about planning. All right, moving along quickly here. Meeting style. So have you agreed on the meeting style and the mechanics? How will it run? If you're having an important meeting, think about it, visualize it, try and imagine how it will flow and how it will run. This will make it seem more natural when you get into the meeting. So have you thought about the meeting? What style of meeting will you run? Will it be someone presenting? Will it be around the table discussion? Will it be a decision-making meeting? All of these things. So, will there be a conversation, a presentation? Is it a strategic planning meeting? Will decisions be made in this meeting? How will they be made? Will they be made through unanimous decision, or is it as long as more than half the people agree, like a democratic system? So think about how this is going to work so that when you get in there, it just runs smoothly. Have you agreed how decisions will be made? So I just mentioned that, does the boss have the final say? Do you vote on it? Do you need quorum? Do you need consensus? All of these things will make it flow faster. And imagine how your meeting will flow and what will happen at different stages of the meeting. If you organize and plan it well, you will visualize the stages. You will think about it. Here's at the beginning, I'm going to welcome the participants. I'm going to make my external guests feel comfortable. I'm going to tell them the rules. So we're going to talk for 45 minutes or an hour. Then we're going to have a break and have a coffee at this time and blah, blah, blah. So you are, visualizing the stages, and then you can tell people in the meeting the stages, and, really makes it super clear for people and they know what's coming next. Logistics. So logistics is always important because we need to book a meeting room. I mean, within organizations, have you booked the meeting room? That's terrible if you forget that. Sometimes people forget to even book the meeting room, and then they are horrified when they realize that they've got a really important meeting coming up and all the meeting rooms are booked. Does the space have appropriate lighting? Make sure you're not stuck in some dungeon in the basement of your organization. That's not going to help. And have you sent out meeting invitations and made sure everyone has confirmed? If you've got important people that need to be there and they haven't confirmed, maybe you should call them before, because it's going to be pretty embarrassing if you need that person who's important in the organization to help make a decision and they can't make the meeting. That's going to put a very spanner in the works, as we say in English. It's going to make your meeting fall apart. And have you arranged refreshments for a long meeting? Think about that. You need to make sure that people have a break. As a rule, I would say no more than about an hour before you have a break. Just a 10-minute break makes a big difference, helps to refocus people, and sometimes people can get quite hungry mid-morning. And of course, you should always test your equipment, especially if you're delivering a really important presentation on your company, because you want to sell your products and services to a very important potential customer, and then the equipment breaks and it causes you a great level of embarrassment and makes you look very unprofessional. So always check that before you go into an important meeting. Okay, coming up to the end now, the agenda is really important. Have you sent it out at least 24 hours before? So you need to send it out 24 hours in advance to give people time to prepare. You need to make sure it lists all the items and the timings and the roles. Those are three important things that should be on the agenda. Most people just list the items, they don't list the timings, and they forget to list the roles. And have you sent any required reading, which I mentioned before? So those are really important. Make sure people have the relevant documentation that they need. And the final preparation, which is the last stage of my meeting checklist, make sure you are ready. Okay, do a final check on your documents. Okay, so it's always important to make sure that you've double checked everything quickly, especially for important meetings. Have you got your documents, presentations, reports, etc. ready, just to make sure that everything's ready to go for those important meetings? And is everyone clear on their role? Make sure that you just double check that so that you don't have any people still wondering. Remember, people, you can send them 1,000 emails, but they probably will only open one. Okay, so sometimes, even despite your best efforts to prepare people refuse to be prepared. Okay, that is Well, there you go, people. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar, full of lots of insightful information and really useful tips on how to effectively plan for your meeting. Now, of course, if you are interested in taking advantage of the webinar offer, it's still up for those of you who have listened right through to the end. So head over to the Art of Business English website and you will be able to pick up my signature course for only $29.99. That's right, $29.99. It's epic value. So I'm just linking this offer to those of you who have joined the webinar. So I'll link up to it on the website. So if you're listening to this webinar over on iTunes or the podcast, you'll need to head over to the Art of Business English website and go to the podcast section or the blogcast section where you will find this podcast link, and there I'll have a link for you and you can join the Confidence in Business Meeting online course for only $29.99. So check it out, guys. It's an epic course, and what you've experienced today is just a taste. So enjoy. I hope you have found a lot of value in this, and I look forward to having you all next week. Take care. Bye for now.